Hey, Sean from Invest to Live. Thanks for joining us for another video here. Today we're going to talk about real estate, but specifically we're going to talk about property management. And before we jump in, as always, please hit that like button if you see value from this video. And even more so, if you think that this is something you want to learn more about over time, please hit the subscribe button as well. Let's jump right on in. I am a real estate investor. I own some properties sort of spread throughout the US here. And I am a fan and a user of property managers. I'm going to get into what that means, the different designations that might exist, the types of properties you potentially can have managed, but also understanding like some of the different models that's included with that, what you typically could expect to have included in that contract, and sort of the values and benefits that I see with it, as well as how I like to understand the reviews that you might see online. I also want to speak to some of the cons as well towards the end of the video because it's not always perfect. So without further ado, let's really baseline this thing. A property manager or property management company is a person or a company that you hire and typically pay either a fee, whether it's a flat rate or percentage, to oversee your properties. This can mean a big various degree of different things that could be as simple as helping to put tenants in or remove tenants, or it could be a full service shop that does everything from listing your units for rent, interviewing tenants, taking applications and showing the unit, preparing it for rent, managing the process while they're in there. This means like maintenance items, doing repairs, ongoing relationships with vendors. It could also mean, ensuring renewals are done, negotiating rates, doing evictions at the end, and getting apartments ready for new tenants when old ones leave. So what your needs are can be different than other investors who are in the real estate market, but just keep in mind, there's typically going to be someone out there who can cover one or all of the aspects of what you need from a management perspective. Just for some perspective, I like to use a full service shop where they handle all of it for me. It's not that I'm necessarily looking to be completely hands off. I just would prefer to be as minimally hands on as possible. I want to manage the financial aspect of growing my rental portfolio, not managing the day to day. And because I tend to treat it very much like a business, I see property management as a cost of doing business and one that I take into account when I look at the numbers of, excuse me, whether a property is going to make sense, whether I have the right kind of numbers for it to be profitable and something I want to invest my money in. So that's sort of the baseline of understanding, what exactly a property manager is, what some of those roles and duties might be. Now, in terms of the types that are out there, it's huge. It's like any kind of business. It could be a one-person shop where they just want to, manage a couple of properties as a side business. It's something that they do and they're good at. Could be friends or family. It could be someone who does this on the side. Sometimes we see realtors or real estate offices also do property management. But there's also sort of the complete flip side, which is like complete scaled businesses that have national presence, who cover everything, big online presence, the ability to really scale across your needs. I think the way you should treat this yourself is figure out what works for you and works with your personality, and that should drive sort of your business making decisions here. And also understand, like, if you're a person who's really interested in the technology behind it, accessing things online, having a good, strong portfolio that you can go and check out, that's a consideration to look into as well when you decide whether you want something small, local, something big and national, or something in between. So the other piece here as well is that, like any profession where we're dealing with real estate, dealing with people, there are a number of designations that exist out there. I'm not going to go over all of them, excuse me. But just for example, there are things like, real property administrators, they're certified property managers, and this sort of covers everything from designations that exist for, the single family market, the multifamily market, the apartment complexes, condo management, commercial property management. Commercial properties could be everything from, retail stores to restaurant plots to shopping malls, really anything. So again, depending on your use case, what kind of property you're looking to have rented will depend on what kind of property manager you may need or may even be looking to do. Now let's talk about some of the costs that can be associated with a property manager for your rental properties. The two most popular, and these are really the only ones I'm going to focus on, are what I consider to be the ongoing costs, which is either going to be a percentage of rent or a fixed fee per month. These are typically the ones you see all the time, or certainly the most of the time. Fixed rate seems to be really rising in popularity more than ever. I think this is just really in an effort to be more competitive, especially with some of the larger national firms, looking to standardize and have more predictable revenue on their end, more so than anything. For me personally, and what I see most often in my space is paying somewhere between 8 and 12% per month, depending on the services provided, also depending on the type of area your rental properties are in. If the tenant class is a little bit harder to manage, harder to collect rent, more evictions, I would usually expect to pay a little bit more. For easier to manage properties, and again, I'm talking like single families, smaller multifamilies, 8 to 10% is what you'd expect to pay. On my single families, I pay 10%, and honestly, I'm pretty happy with that overall. I build that into my overall model as far as whether it's profitable, worth getting involved in or not, and that sort of drives my decision making. Other considerations to take is most property managers will charge a first month rental fee. So, as an example, of course, if you're asking for $1,000 a month rent, that $1,000 a month for that first month is going to go to your property manager. And then typically you'll also pay $100 per month if it's a 10% percentage to that property manager every month. Now you might say to yourself, wow, that's a lot of money to give up. I don't know if it's worth it. Completely makes sense to me. I get that 100%. I think there's two schools of thought here. I can do it myself without an issue and stay compliant to any local laws. And if that's the case, you feel confident in it, I think great. Save yourself some money. Maybe that's the way to go for you. For me personally, I really do see this as a business where I can't necessarily run the back office, the front office, the cash register, the repairs and maintenance issues that arise. And also, I don't live near a lot of the properties. So for me, it just makes sense to have a strong property manager. It means I'm not getting calls. I'm not being brought in for issues that arise. And I'm not even saying those often happen, but it's just good to be aware that there's someone there who can help me with that as well. And then from the maintenance perspective, the construction perspective, there are things that are going to happen. I actually just recently had someone hit a mailbox in front of one of my single families, and simple thing, had to be repaired and replaced. That was a case where they sent me a notice. They're replacing the mailbox. This is what it's going to cost. All was good. It was done within a couple of days. Tenant was happy. I'm happy. Property management company is happy. We're all back to business. So just know that a lot of the times you're going to have sort of a fixed dollar amount. Let's call it 300 to 500 for the sake of conversation, where any repairs or maintenance under that dollar amount will be auto approved. Typically, they'll keep that certain dollar amount in some sort of an escrow or holding, against your account as well. So when those things pop up, they can just fix them right away, keep the tenants happy, keep the property compliant. If it's bigger things or bigger issues, you're typically going to make sure you understand how does that process work? What does it say within the contract that you're signing with your property management firm? And understanding how long does it take to get these big repairs done? Who will be doing the work? What kind of licensing is needed to do that? Just sort of good due diligence to understand, what your expectations should be, what's going to be included in that, and then just overall, what you can expect for an ongoing basis. I think this is where there's sort of a degree of gray area where you want to both make sure that they're doing the right work, you're being charged appropriately for it, and not being overcharged. But at the same time, you want to make sure you have trust with the person who's overseeing your assets here in the case of real estate. One huge thing that I think has become increasingly tough nowadays is to actually find a good property manager, because licensing isn't enough. And I think you really have to get references, and you have to really have an opportunity to talk to them, speak to them, understand what kind of a contact you're going to have with them going forward. I have a monthly call, literally about 15 minutes usually, where they just update me, let me know if there's any issues, any repairs that were done, any repairs that are needed, anything that's concerning. If a tenant has let them know they're planning to move out at the end of the term, or if they'd like to renew, or if I have properties that are empty and what we're looking at from a standpoint of getting someone in there. So these are all the kind of things that I like to think about ahead of time. Is this something we're going to be doing? How often do we talk about it? What's communication look like? Is it an email, a phone call? Can I log into a website to see all of this? And I'm a pretty easygoing guy in general. So the phone call once a month for 15 minutes, for me, that's great. If you're looking to have like a weekly check-in because you really want to stay on top of your property, that's great. Make sure you're getting with a property manager who's open to that and has the time to do it. This is why I like to have a larger firm where I know there's a customer service side of the house, so I can get in touch with folks if I really need to. There's an 800 number, a 24-hour line, whatever the case might be. Now, I was just saying a minute ago that it can be really hard sometimes to find a property manager. I think the reason for this is if you just Google, property managers near me, what I seem to find is that the ratings are absolutely terrible. Really low ratings on a lot of property managers. Now, I think there's a number of reasons for this, and I want to be really sort of like sensitive to the fact that I think there's a varying degree of why this could be the case. So I want to just sort of give some broad perspective and then tell you to do your homework on how you think about it. What I find when I dig into the details of like all the 1 stars versus all the 5 stars, Typically, the 5 stars seem to come from people who are the owners of the property, saying, hey, great job, they're up to date, they're on time, good communication. Maybe sometimes they're not, but there's the delineation between the people who are using property management firms as their hired party for property management versus tenants who do not like the property management firm, who are also rating them on the same sort of site, right? Where it's like, maybe it was an eviction or a missed payment, or they didn't do a good job cleaning the place, or there's bad communications with the property manager from the tenant side. And oftentimes, I absolutely believe that they're being forthright and forthcoming in the way that they're reviewing these. But I just think it's important to know that if you're just strictly looking at a score on a screen, you have to understand, like, is the rating coming from angry tenants who maybe had a problem, or is it coming from people who are actually paying them on a monthly basis to represent them in their properties? And those are good questions to ask when you're interviewing property managers as well. One of the other challenges that I hear about quite often in the property management space is there's a lot of fly-by-night property managers. So if you think the prices are too good, or you're thinking like, hey, they don't have a license or they don't have a good reference, but it's worth it because there's XYZ reasons I want to do this, just some caution here. You're dealing with tenant laws, you're dealing with contracts, you're dealing with escrowing money. Make sure that the person you're working with is professional, referenceable, licensed, has insurance, is bonded, whatever the case might be for the state where you're looking for property management, because these are things you do not need coming back on you, especially for what is likely one of the biggest assets you're going to own. Really, I think what I would like to end here and say is, for me, having a property manager gives me a lot of ability to think through and understand what I'm focusing on in a big way, without having to be involved in every interaction, every deal, every minutia piece of the business. I do want to know what's going on. I want to have visibility into it. I want to know where the money is going. And if they have a process for me to see all of that, that's great. And if you're saying to yourself, like, look, why would I pay anyone to manage this for me when I can do it myself? I get that. But what I would also argue is, if you're invested in the stock market, someone else is running those companies. If you're invested in a mutual fund or an ETF, there's a manager managing that fund where you're putting your money as well. You have a 401k, same thing. So just, for what it's worth, think about the value that you're getting for the price that you're paying. If it makes sense, awesome. If it doesn't, awesome. But the other thing to keep in mind too is I'm writing off those property management fees against the revenue that I'm taking in. So I'm also getting tax benefits there on top of what I'm getting from the depreciation of these assets. So it's another factor to consider that you may not be thinking about right off the top. So this was not meant to be a super deep dive, just sort of an initial piece of what my thoughts are of property managers, what they are, what they do, the types of flavors they come in, the way they charge, and how I use it. I would love to go really deep here or give some case studies as far as like things I've seen happen with my own portfolio or other friends as well. And one final thing too, I have no affiliation with this website whatsoever, but biggerpockets.com is a great site for getting references, finding property managers near you, vetting them, seeing if there's been issues with them with other people who are on the site who have rental properties as well. So I would really, really urge you to sometimes start there. Just search on the name of the property management firm you're looking for, or search for, property manager in whatever city you're looking for. I think you're going to get some really good real results there as a starting point before you just do like general searches that are going to lead to all kinds of confusion, misalignment of ratings and all this other stuff. So anyways, thanks so much for listening. I have a lot going on from the real estate perspective. So please comment below if there's a certain piece you'd like to know more about, how we look at properties, how we value them, how we look at rent, how we plan to grow the portfolio, what that portfolio looks like. I would love to go into details if that's an area of interest for anyone. So thanks so much for watching as always. Hope it's good for you. It's good for me, and hope you keep being profitable. So thanks so much.